You don't need to be a defense analyst to see it. Something big is happening in the skies over South Asia, and it's painted in the green and white of Pakistan. For years, the global narrative around air power in the region has been dominated by the size, technology and money behind India's massive air force, bolstered recently by the much-hyped Rafale jets from France. But a quieter revolution has been underway, one that doesn't rely on billion-dollar deals or headlines in Western media. It sort of comes in the form of the JF-17 Thunder. This isn't just another fighter jet. It's a symbol of strategic defiance, self-reliance, and calculated ambition. Developed in partnership with China and now being increasingly produced on home soil, the JF-17 is rewriting the rules of aerial warfare for countries that refuse to be bullied or outspent. It's multi-role, combat-tested, and evolving fast. And unlike the glittering toys of Western arsenals, it doesn't bankrupt a nation to own it. But here's where the narrative really shifts. This jet is making its presence felt beyond Pakistan's borders. When nations like Nigeria and Myanmar turn to the JF-17, they're not just buying hardware, they're buying into a new defense philosophy, one where smart design, affordability, and political independence matter more than brand names and Western approval. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room. When India flexes with French jets and Israeli tech, Pakistan isn't trembling, it's responding. With the JF-17 Block 3, equipped with advanced radar systems, electronic warfare capabilities and long-range missiles, Pakistan is doing more than leveling the playing field, it's redefining it. Suddenly, air superiority isn't about who has the most expensive toys, it's about who can adapt faster, strike smarter, and fight on their own terms. This isn't just a military shift, it's a geopolitical signal. Pakistan is no longer content playing second fiddle in the region. Through the JF-17, it's asserting a voice, a vision, and a deterrent strategy that can't be ignored. Every sortie, every joint exercise, every export deal is part of a broader recalibration of power, one that's moving away from old colonial dependencies and towards a multipolar, multi-partner future. So yes, while some celebrate the thunderous roar of jets they can barely afford, Pakistan has built a thunder that speaks of resilience, strategy, and rising confidence. The regional air balance is shifting, not with noise, but with precision. And the world would do well to watch the skies a little more closely, because the thunder isn't just coming, it's already here. Iran, China, and Russia have not formed an alliance in name, but their coordinated actions in recent years reveal a tightly woven strategic partnership with global consequences. This isn't a superficial alignment for diplomatic theater. It's a deliberate convergence of nations that have been sidelined, sanctioned, or threatened by Western power structures and are now responding with long-term, calculated coordination. What makes this collaboration more potent than previous alliances is its multidimensional nature. It extends beyond military drills or economic exchanges. It's a blueprint for restructuring global influence, born out of necessity, refined by shared experiences, and fueled by a common enemy, the dominance of Western institutions, particularly those led by the United States. For Iran, isolation has been both a punishment and a catalyst. Years of sanctions, military pressure, and economic strangulation have forced the country to build resilience in unconventional ways. But more than just surviving, Iran adapted its strategy to leverage the shifting geopolitical winds. China and Russia offered what the West never would: non-conditional partnerships and a chance to play a central role in a new power bloc. Iran saw an opportunity to break out of isolation, not by yielding to the West's demands, but by making itself useful to alternative powers that viewed American dominance as an obstacle to their own ambitions. Iran's location at the crossroads of Asia and the Middle East, its massive oil reserves, and its growing cyber and missile capabilities make it an indispensable partner in this triangle. China, methodical and patient, has pursued its long game with exceptional discipline. While Western nations floundered in Middle Eastern interventions and internal divisions, China invested heavily in infrastructure, influence, and silent diplomacy. The Belt and Road Initiative is more than an economic project. It's a mechanism to bind countries into long-term economic dependencies. Iran's strategic geography makes it a critical node in this initiative. When Iran and China signed their 25-year Strategic Cooperation Pact, it included not just investments, but deepened political alignment and security cooperation. Through this deal, China gains energy security and a stable land corridor to European markets, while Iran secures investment and political cover. This isn't opportunistic diplomacy, it's structural interdependence with long-term implications. Russia, meanwhile, has reinvented itself through confrontation. After the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Ukraine, Moscow was cast into the role of global outcast by NATO and the EU. But Vladimir Putin didn't retreat, he pivoted, redirecting trade, energy, and arms relationships toward the East and South. Iran became a crucial client and ally, especially for defense and drone collaboration. China became a lifeline for trade and a political shield at the United Nations. This wasn't a marriage of convenience. It was a strategic recalibration designed to circumvent Western pressure. Russia and Iran conducted joint naval exercises, and Moscow facilitated Iran's membership into institutions like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russia and China have likewise ramped up their own military drills, technological exchanges, and diplomatic coordination in multilateral platforms that exclude the US and its allies. This alliance is further solidified by its members' shared use of strategic ambiguity. None of the three openly declare a military pact akin to NATO. They maintain plausible deniability, engaging in actions that stop short of formal commitments, while sending clear messages to the West. When Iran sends drones to Russia for battlefield use in Ukraine, or when China holds joint drills with Russia in the Sea of Japan, or when all three coordinate in energy and arms markets to undercut Western influence, these aren't isolated events. They're proof of coordination under the radar, a quiet but firm assertion of collective power. Another binding element is their synchronization in messaging and narrative, whether it's state-controlled Russian media, Chinese diplomatic statements, or Iranian revolutionary slogans. The core theme is the same. The West is in decline, its values are hypocritical, and its dominance is illegitimate. This shared rhetoric isn't mere propaganda. It creates ideological alignment that allows these nations to justify cooperation, not just as strategy, but as moral imperative. They view Western liberalism as decadent and destabilizing. They present their own model, authoritarian, nationalist, resource-based, and anti-US, as the alternative path forward for the rest of the world. The Western world has largely misread the depth of this alignment. It's not a spontaneous reaction to sanctions or an anti-Western impulse born from recent events. It's a deliberate convergence of long-term goals born from decades of Western overreach and strategic missteps. Each nation offers something vital to the others. Iran brings energy and geographic access. China offers capital and global trade. And Russia supplies military hardware and political cover. They don't need a formal treaty. They have a functional, flexible alliance built on resilience, realism, and revenge. In this emerging architecture, the traditional tools of Western power, sanctions, military posturing, diplomatic pressure, are proving less effective. These three countries have developed parallel systems, trade routes that don't depend on Western ports. payment systems that bypass the dollar, and information platforms insulated from Silicon Valley. They are not just surviving the global order, they are actively building a new one, and they are doing it together. The nuclear dimension of the Iran-China-Russia alignment is where the stakes shift from political maneuvering to existential risk. It's no longer just about diplomatic defiance or economic cooperation. It's about altering the psychological equilibrium that has held the world in check since the Cold War. Iran's nuclear ambitions have entered a phase that is no longer covert or cautious. Years of Western sanctions, threats, and diplomatic isolation have not stopped Tehran, they've emboldened it. The West failed to realize that pressure doesn't always lead to compliance. It can foster desperation, innovation, and silent acceleration. Iran has reached a point where it doesn't need to declare nuclear weapon status outright. The ambiguity of its enrichment levels, the vague red lines it dances around, and the lack of unified Western response create a strategic space where fear becomes its most potent weapon. And in that space, Iran is no longer an isolated actor. It has backing, cover, and reinforcement from both Russia and China. The nuclear conversation isn't limited to Iran's pursuit of a weapon. It's amplified by Russia's unapologetic reintroduction of nuclear threats into modern military doctrine. Since the escalation of the war in Ukraine, Moscow has systematically dismantled long-standing nuclear taboos. What was once an unspoken threat has now become an official part of their military messaging. Tactical nuclear weapons have been spoken about not as doomsday tools, but as viable instruments of war, designed to shift battlefield momentum, deter Western support to Kiev, or signal to NATO that escalation will come at a price far higher than sanctions. Russia's relocation of nuclear-capable weapons near NATO borders and its withdrawal from arms control agreements all point to a shift from deterrence to deliberate signaling. Russia knows the West has grown cautious, conflict-fatigued, and economically strained. This creates the perfect window to use nuclear rhetoric, not just as a threat, but as a tool of leverage. China, often the quietest in military escalation, is rapidly discarding its previous posture of minimal deterrence. For decades, Beijing operated under the assumption that a small but survivable nuclear force was sufficient. But that philosophy is changing dramatically. Satellite images confirm the construction of hundreds of new missile silos across China's remote western regions. Reports suggest it is expanding its nuclear arsenal far beyond previous estimates. Beijing is modernizing its submarine fleet, developing new intercontinental ballistic missiles, and investing in mobile launch platforms that would make its second strike capability far more robust. And it is doing all of this without participating in any serious nuclear arms control dialogue. While the US and Russia still speak in the language of treaties, verification, and ceilings, China remains silent, unwilling to confirm, deny, or explain the scale of its expansion. This calculated opacity serves a purpose. It generates uncertainty, and uncertainty in nuclear affairs is a kind of power. What binds these three nations together in the nuclear theater is more than weapons. It's intent. Iran doesn't need to test a bomb. Russia doesn't need to launch one. China doesn't need to threaten with them.